I do not think a logical person thinks that President Trump is trying to become a king. If the phrase does not have "but Jesus," then guess who has become the king of this particular march? Our emotions. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I am dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. In this episode, we are going to discuss the recent weekend No Kings March to absolute confusion, and it has been a confusing weekend. It was the Army's 250th anniversary, which was very impressive. It also marked President Trump's 79th birthday. It was also the No Kings March across the nation, which garnered about 5 million people. And it was also Pope Francis's first address to the native Chicagoans at the White Sox Stadium. So it's going to be quite the episode, but a summary to help bring clarity to how we as Catholics are supposed to understand all that happened this past weekend. But before we jump into it, please make sure you help us to overcome the algorithms of the internet's trying to suppress Catholic content by liking, subscribing, sharing, and comment. And if, by the way, you watch this on your television, just go to your phone, go to YouTube, get to the Father Leo Show, like, subscribe, share, and comment. And also, please consider supporting us on patreon.com/the Father Leo Show, because there you get access to great content, but you also support us so that we can continue to dish out faith, culture, and commentary. And this past weekend definitely needed some commentary. So as you already know, this past weekend just needed a lot of kind of clarity because so much was happening. It shows just how divided we are. But that's what happens when emotions get the best of us. And this No Kings March was pretty disappointing for me. And if Catholics are supporting it, they have to reconsider why they marched on June 14th. Because it's a phrase that is trying to make President Trump appear as a despot, a monarchy, a king who is just going to kind of tell everybody what to do and what to believe. Now, from a logical point of view, a logical, not emotional, logical point of view, that is not the case. I do not think a logical person thinks that President Trump is trying to become a king. In the same way, the United States fought against the Kingdom of England because it wanted its independence. But the phrase "no king" is actually an incomplete statement because it actually has a motto in historical roots, particularly in association to the American Revolution and the Constitutional Party of North Carolina. And the original phrase was this: no king but the King Jesus. No king but Jesus as the king. And that's why I say, if Catholics marched with June 14th, I'm not calling you terrible people, but I am calling it a march with confusion, because a lot of people want to say that this was just simply to hurt President Trump, who wants to see himself as king. I honestly don't think any logical person sees that President Trump wants to become king. He's written a lot of executive orders, but they've all been, the majority of them have been upheld by courts. So there is kind of a constitutional check. But more importantly, if the phrase does not have "but Jesus," then guess who has become the king of this particular march? Our emotions. And our emotions cannot be how we live and execute, or at least live in a practical reality. So what I want to do is jump into this, because I'm not saying that everybody who marched on June 14th are bad people. They're not. In fact, I can probably even divide this group up into 3 people. But the reason why I bring this up now is because Cardinal Cupich actually welcomed Pope Leo the 14th to offer a televised basically not a recorded, but a live televised message from the Vatican. And his message was really beautiful. It was all about making sure people are connected to hope. It was really quite beautiful. And he did a really good thing. He stayed away from the politics of the day. Cupich, however, did not. This is what he had to say.
We should keep this in mind as we in our city and our nation face the challenges of immigration. Without question, countries have a duty to secure their borders, protect the public good from crime and violence, and enact reasonable rules for immigration. At the same time, it is wrong to scapegoat those who are here without documents, for indeed they are here due to a broken immigration system. And it is a broken immigration system which both parties have failed to fix. The task before us in this moment as Christians is to call each other to live with authenticity, as authentic persons, rejecting language or activity that demonizes or degrades the dignity of others, that pretends that some persons are unworthy to be connected to us. That is foreign to our calling to be persons in the image and likeness of God, and it is also dishonest. For indeed, so many of the undocumented have for decades been connected to us. They are here not by invasion, but by invitation.
So that was Cardinal Cupich of the Archdiocese of Chicago offering the homily during this Mass at the stadium for the White Sox. And then after that, Pope Leo gave his address. And I honestly don't have much to disagree with in terms of these comments. They are not as nuanced as I would like them to be. His idea of these immigrants, undocumented, are here by invitation, not by an invasion. I think that was more politically charged, but that's kind of the way Cupich approaches things. And again, I'm not in complete agreement, nor am I in disagreement, but it was just kind of part of the whole tone of this weekend. There was just a lot of lacking in very specifics, to the point where what I'd like to do is just divide what I would say the groups of people are into three categories. I'm sure there can be other categories, but this is for me to be able to communicate to you so that you can have a way to understand everything that happened this past weekend. It's just a pastoral way to understand things. Because a homily like this, which would take about maybe 8 to 10 minutes, I don't know how long he actually preached, but this comment right here was charged and it got people applauding. And Pope Francis would not be happy that people are applauding during Mass, but that's another story, and may Pope Francis' soul rest in peace. But Pope Francis had this fourfold approach to immigration, and it was to welcome, to protect, promote, and integrate. We're going to talk about that at the end of the show. Right now, however, I kind of want to divide those who marched in the No King's March but Jesus, that's my march, but in this past weekend, there were a lot of people who would not follow Jesus. They just hate Trump. And so perhaps there are three groups of people. And the first group of people are honestly very bad players, very nefarious people. And why do I say this? Well, because this was not just a generic march by the people. This was a well-funded, very organized march to basically discredit Trump because people hate him. We know that that's the case. There are some people who love him, some people who want to deify him almost as the savior of the world. I don't think there are many, but There are just a lot of people who really like him because he is following his campaign rhetoric that he was going to actually fix the immigration system, which Cardinal Cupich alluded to. So in all of this, we have to say that Trump inherited a very broken system, and he's been trying to fix it in his previous administration. Then all that he did to try to fix it in 2016, 2020 was completely decimated by what President Biden and Kamala Harris did in their 4 years in 20 to 2024. They were just terrifically horrible with regards to the immigration system, which is why Trump probably won. And so he won because he said he was going to fix it, but before you fix it, you have to make sure that people know we're upholding the current laws. And you might not like the laws, but anyway, the first group of people who marched were very bad players with a lot of money, just simply trying to tear down Trump. And this is a pretty impressive video. I did some fact checking with all of this, and I would have to say that the questions asked in this video are worth asking more legitimately. Check this out.
You have every right to peacefully protest, but you also have a right to know who's behind this movement. The No Kings protests happening tomorrow are not what they seem to be. Many people are going to protest the president and think that this is a grassroots effort, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Just looking at their website alone, you know that there was significant money poured into this. Even down to their interactive map, like this all costs money to do. They say that on June 14th, Flag Day, President Trump wants tanks in the streets and a made-for-TV display of dominance for his birthday. No Kings is a nationwide day of defiance. Now, who actually paid for that website and who's behind it? This indivisible group is actually the ones that are funding this entire thing. They say at the bottom of their website that not only are they a political action committee, but they're also a registered 501c4. 501c4s are what we call dark money groups. There's a good reason for that because they have no legal obligation to disclose their donors, even if they spend to influence elections. They bring in millions of dollars a year, but we don't actually know who funds them. However, this does appear to be the work of George Soros and Reid Hoffman, two billionaires. Since it's most likely Democrats going to this rally, and Democrats typically are against doing what billionaires say, I figured you should know this. You should also know that the parade tomorrow in DC is not for Trump's birthday, it's for the Army's 250th birthday. They've actually had—
And so she kind of goes on with a little bit more of what's going on, but she also raised another person's name, and his name has come up is Neville Singham. And just what's really interesting is that the Oversight Committee on June the 13th, 2025, offered a press release, and this is the Oversight Committee for Government Reform, kind of investigating several people who were kind of responsible for the funding of this march, and mentioned the George Soros and the Neville Singhs. These are people who really are not operating in America's best interest. These are all the same people who provide riot gear, as well as the pallets of bricks to be thrown during the anti-ICE raids. And we know that these problems, these problematic protests which turn riotous and therefore evil, are really the responsibility of people who are funding them. And like, for example, there's a guy out there, and he is actually showing, this is kind of impressive, this No Kings anti-ICE protest in Philadelphia. They had just boxes of flyers, and we were even, there's a video out there of someone saying, don't show the Mexican flag, show the American flag instead. We know that in previous protests, American flags were hardly to be seen. There were a lot more American flags showing up in the recent No Kings march, simply because that has become the talking point, because the optics are bad. They want people to realize that people realize that if they're burning down American flags, but raising the Mexican flag or the Palestinian flag, the optics are confusing. Because why would we burn down the flag of the country we live in that gives us the right to protest, and raise the flag of a country where people do not want to be returned or deported or repatriated back into. So the optics are confusing, and that confusion, honestly, comes from evil. And that evil is coming from bad players. So we know that there are a lot of people who are responsible for the No Kings March who collude with evil. And why do I say that? Because they want to create confusion. They want to create division. And that was very obvious from the second group of people. And there are a second group of people who really just hate Donald Trump. So not only is there a first group of people that just wants to destroy America. And why? Because America stands for values. And if you can destroy America and create division and confusion, because no house divided can stand, there are people who truly don't like America. I've met some of these people, actually. But then there are also just people who really don't like Donald Trump. You know, and there are at least less than half of the American people who don't like him. But they can't actually articulate why they are there. And so this is interesting because I saw this little clip from a German news channel that wanted to show that there were people participating in the No Kings movement who were very peaceful, very peaceful. And so they were there for a third category of people. And we're going to talk about that next because those are the people I want to talk to from a pastoral priestly point of view. But the second group of people who are just people who don't like Trump. And this is an example of that. Just watch.
All lives matter. All lives matter. They're crazy.
Why?
Yeah, she told them to turn it off because I was telling them we're not criminals. We're walking peacefully, you know?
Ah, they turned it off?
Turn it off.
What channel was that?
I don't know, but they turned it off.
Yo, what channel was this?
It's for a German channel, German television.
Oh.
Just watching.
Oh, really? What do they think about it in Germany?
Well, we're trying to show that the city of Los Angeles is being attacked by the Trump administration.
Oh.
So this is why I love TikTok. I mean, it could be a time killer, but social media can't be outdone because they're able to do the things that mainstream media can't do. And that's to get kind of actual on the ground expressions of reality. What I mean by on the ground expressions of reality. This is a whole network that was going to this No Kings March, and they came across someone who was peaceful. And they probably, you know, I don't know what this Hispanic man said. I didn't like his language necessarily, but he was trying to say that we're all peaceful. We're peacefully protesting because we're allowed to do that in a free country. But what they wanted to do was create a spin it. And they turned off the interview because it was just not controversial or violent enough, and it wouldn't show that this man hates Trump. And what this German network wanted to do was manipulate what people are seeing, at least in Germany, to make Germans hate Trump even more. I don't know if you know this, but there's a whole group of people out there that want to confuse you. And there are people who are absolutely brainwashed into this kind of narrative because they are, how shall I say this? They're almost addicted to wanting to hate something because it's virtue signaling. I can't tell you how many videos of just very random reporters, unpaid reporters who make money off of the internet simply just by doing live interviews. And so many of them are not necessarily leaning one way or the other. They just want to understand where people are coming from. And the responses that you get from some of these folks is absolutely mind-boggling because they don't know how to answer the question, why are you protesting? They don't even know. They honestly have no real facts, which is why I lump them all into this third category. This third category of people who I can actually sympathize with, but they need help. And that's where I want to be of help. So the first group, let me repeat it, are people who are just evil. And I do believe that there are very evil people who just want to divide this country. The second group of people are people who just hate Trump, and they want to do everything they can to just tear him down because they honestly think that the failed program of the Democrats, the most recent past 4 years under their leadership, were better than what Trump gave to us in 2016 to 2020, and now from 2025 onward, 2024 onward. But there's a third group of people, and these are people, again, with whom I can sympathize. They are an emotional group of people. And so people who marched in this out of emotion is because they are confused, they are hurt, they've not seen the laws of the land being enforced, and their lives are at least somewhat affected when a classmate is deported or at least detained, when they see people kind of running from a parking lot at a Home Depot because cops pull in and they feel like they're being treated without dignity. There are people who are emotionally upset because their neighbors are being deported. You know, who's not going to feel sad when an abuela, a grandmother, is taking her chancla, her slippers, and slapping the riot shield of police officers? These are evoking emotions, and our emotions need to be informed. And that's why I'm speaking specifically to those who are emotionally conflicted by this very sad state of affairs, that as a result of an election, actions were taken to uphold the immigration laws, and they are jarring. Again, it's like cold water on somebody who has been sitting in a hot tub, like the boiling frog effect. We are shocked that there are actually going to be consequences to the actions of, as Cardinal Cupich says, a broken immigration system. But whose fault is this? Well, it's a lot of people's faults, but honestly, these past 4 years and the previous administration under President Biden and Vice President Harris, it was terrible. And so to try to fix a broken system is kind of like trying to put a cast on a broken arm, and if the cast is not put on properly, the broken arm is actually going to stay broken, and guess what you've got to do to it? Break it again in order to fix it properly. So I honestly think that's what we're feeling. The pain of breaking an arm that was not healed properly. I'm going to repeat that. I think what we're feeling is the fear and the pain of having to break an arm again that was not healed properly. That's the only way that I can describe it, because I don't see the same type of emotional marching and outbreak of kind of like a coming together. Now, all in all, there were about 5 million people across the nation, and also including people from other parts of the world who were participating in one way or the other on this No Kings March. So that's a lot of people, but perhaps not enough to sway an election. And why do I bring this up is because elections have consequences. And of these people, there were a lot of good people marching in that, but I never once heard them complain about this.
If you plan to enter the U.S. illegally, your chances of getting caught and sent back just went up.
If they've committed a crime, deport them. No questions asked, they're gone.
That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before.
Even as we are a nation of immigrants, we're also a nation of laws. Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws.
So, minus the music in the background, the point is these are sound clips from President Clinton, presidential candidate Hillary Rodham Clinton, and President Obama, known as the deporter-in-chief. People never rallied as they are now against this. They're doing it now. Because again, bad actors and people who hate Trump, and those are in collusion oftentimes, and it's really affecting the emotions of the people who would just rather excuse everything and say, I don't want to change the status quo, deport all of the criminals. But the problem is people, and you heard President Obama say it, those who break immigration laws are committing criminal acts. Doesn't mean that they're violent, but they are breaking a law. It is a crime for anyone to overstay a visa. And while it is very challenging to become an American citizen, you have to know it's because it's not a right. It's a privilege. And yeah, I wish that Americans who were born in this country will take this privilege seriously, but they're not taking it seriously. It's becoming almost an emotional roller coaster for them. And it's to the point where the term privilege is a bad word. It's not. It's a word that means responsibility. We have the responsibility to not only be good citizens, but to elect the people who are actually going to create the laws on immigration so that it's something that we can all agree with. And at one point in this country, we all agreed that if somebody overstayed their visa, did not report to court, and if they're trying to now fix their papers and they had all this time to do it prior, but they get caught and are deported, it's actually sad to see families break apart. But it's an emotion that I can't get completely involved in unless you're willing to take action. And this is where I want to offer this thought. The Catholic Church is probably the only institution that can offer to the government any real practical solutions. Because we do believe, as you heard Cupich say, we have to be able to protect our nation and to enforce the laws. But we also have to be able to make distinctions. In my previous video, I encourage you to watch it again, I bring up the distinction between validity and illicit or licity. What is valid versus what is legal. Because this language, if we actually talk to the powers that be, we might be able to provide some context, because all immigrants, whether you're documented or not, you are valid. You have value. You have validity. You exist, and you must be cared for. But there's also illicity, an illegality that we have to approach this unique situation. And there may be 10 million undocumented people. There might actually be more. I'm not sure of those numbers. But it's that which needs some kind of clarification, and the church can provide this support. And so Pope Francis had a phrase in order to kind of move forward with the immigration process. He wanted to create a culture that welcomed, protected, promoted, and integrated. Okay, and integrated. But the church needs to realize that we're not always welcoming. We're not always welcoming. We're not welcoming. If I go to a liberal church, they're not always welcoming to some of my conservative viewpoints. If I go to a conservative church, they might not always be welcoming to some of my questions that would appear liberal. So, look, we've got a lot of work to do as a church before we can really be of service to the government on this issue. We have to be more welcoming. 2, protect. Yeah, so to protect people, I have not seen the Catholic Church yet put in money to provide legal counsel for all immigrants. just the ones that we might know of that might be present to us. But we've got to be able to put our money where our mouth is. This whole idea of promoting, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I think kind of like lifting them up in society as valued members. And that might be true. But again, when I hear sometimes priests and bishops saying that immigrants who is going to pick our strawberries, sorry, that's not a form of promotion. And then this idea of integration. Again, we struggle with this as a church. We're not integrated as a church. You have the Spanish Mass, you have the Vietnamese Mass, you have the Korean Mass, you have the English Mass. And where's the integration there? Because culturally, we are somewhat divided. So Bishop Pham, who, the news media, it's so funny, the media is just all in awe about him because, he's a great man, by the way. He's been appointed as the upcoming bishop for San Diego, which is literally the next city over to Tijuana, where there's a lot of border crossings from Mexico into the United States through Tijuana. Anyway, he is the upcoming appointed bishop. And he is on the news now because everyone is lauding him as someone who gets it. And he is actually going to, on the morning of June 20th, he is going to have a press conference with the other two bishops of San Diego. And they are planning to stand in front of the federal building to stand in solidarity with migrants who are making their court appearances. He says, we know that migrants and refugees find themselves in difficult predicament of being called to appear, which is what the government asks of them, and then being given orders for expedited removal from our country. So that's at least a story that is out there. I know that that is probably true because they have broken a law, and now people are trying to show up for their court cases to kind of rectify their papers. And so they are going to gather from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. and they're inviting many people of faith, clergy members of church leaders of different faiths to come together to show solidarity and to be kind of a presence to all of those who want to go to court. Because, look, if a priest shows up, there might be a little bit more clemency and mercy for those going to hear have their hearing heard for what to do next with their immigration status. And I think that's a great idea. But please take this as with the greatest amount of respect, Bishop Pham and all of the bishops, including a good friend, Bishop Pulido, who is a classmate of mine. 7 to 10 a.m. that one day. Why don't we just send the priest there to be there for the entire year? Have clergy present for the entire year to accompany each of their undocumented church members every day, have them there. Because a span of 3 hours, what will that do? I just ask myself that question. Because you see, the church does have at least the philosophical, theological, moral gravity to help provide a response to the government on the immigration issue. But we are not, as I said before, we're not always welcoming, we're not always protecting, we're not always promoting, we're not always integrating. We've got to get our house in order first before we start throwing out these ideas and these talking points. Because if we don't get our house in order first, then guess what? Our efforts are going to fall on deaf ears. That's why I wanted to talk to that third group of people who were emotionally invested in this No King March. And so I'm going to just say it to you, and I'm saying it to me too. How have I welcomed an immigrant? How have I protected one? How have I promoted one? And how have I integrated one? If every Catholic did it for just one immigrant, then maybe we would be able to make a change. And I can say that at least my family has done that with many immigrants from the Philippines. I have seen my mom and dad bend over backwards and even sponsor people coming into this country, welcoming them. They stayed in our home. I mean, they literally became family. I can count at least 4 people who we've done this for in my family. And we have protected them. I mean, not like we were harboring them illegally, but we put them in the right places so that we can at least find the right people to help them with their case. We promoted them. We gave them job opportunities, and we have integrated them. They're still part of our life and part of our family, and we've introduced them to a whole bunch of other people. In other words, my family, mom and dad in particularly, and I love them because they're immigrants. I'm an immigrant. But my mom and dad came to this country in the legal way, and it was great sacrifice. And that's why my family feels the privilege, to the point where we also knew our responsibility. Marching on June 14th would have done nothing. You got to actually start walking the talk. So before Catholics participate in any more anti-ICE raids or more stunts like the June 14th No Kings March, which is again a real, we as Catholics should have, or Christians should take great offense to this title. The title should be No Kings But Jesus March. And in that case, we have to ask ourselves, who have we welcomed? Who have we protected from people taking advantage of them? And that's what I meant. You know, there could have been other people who could take advantage of the people my family sponsored. How have we promoted them? How have we given them opportunities? And how have we integrated them into our American culture and our American way of life? So that's to the third group of people, the ones whose emotions are invested and conflicted and confused. If you are feeling this way, I'm challenging everyone who's listening to walk the talk. Get to know an immigrant. Welcome them into your home. Churches, welcome them into your rectories. You know, priests and religious communities, give them space in your home. Provide them the money so that they can get the immigration lawyer. Give them good paying jobs and not these menial tasks, which a lot of terrible companies are taking advantage of their immigration status and paying them less than what they deserve. And then making sure that they feel like they truly are part of the family by making sure you give them English classes as well so that they can learn how to speak properly, so that they can take the test like my aunt did and become an American citizen. This is what I have to say. Again, this is trying to take a more practical approach, and I hope it helps. Please make sure you let us know what your thoughts are on this in the comment section. Like, subscribe, and share. And as always, your support on the Patreon community helps us to continue to dish out faith, culture, and commentary so that we can feed people body, mind, and soul. God bless you. And in the meantime, remember, there are no kings. We say this every 4th of July. But people who go to church on 4th of July know what the real meaning of that march was about. There is no king but Jesus. And I hope to God you stay hungry for him.